Good morning, folks. It is
Yeah,
Sunday, not just
right.
any Sunday, but the Sunday where all of a sudden at 2 o'clock in the damn morning, it became 3 o'clock in the damn morning. I lost an hour and I want it back. And I blame Elon Musk. That guy is fucking trying to steal everything from us. I don't know how he does it. Maybe it's those little Russian kids he's got going around and pulling shit out of people's buildings, but we will fix that eventually.
I
Now,
don't know
actually,
why everybody's complaining about him. He's making things more efficient, you know?
oh yeah, absolutely.
The
Nothing
government
says more efficient like having less staff to do the job that can't quite do it right now. That's really important. But we'll get into that and all sorts of other things as we spring forward into the rotation.
Marijuana in my soul, marijuana in my heart.
Actually, I think if I had a choice, I would have sprung forward more than just an hour. I'd say like 2 years, at least 2 years, maybe 4 years. That I'd be okay with. But no, it was only taking a fucking hour of my sleep and making it disappear.
I'd rather 6 years. I need 4 years to get rid of the current administration and then 2 years of recovery time, and then we're good.
Hey, the recovery time sometimes is the most fun, I think.
I
But
don't,
that
I just want things to be good.
that's true because by that time the anarchists will have to have done so much damage that we'll have to find a way to fix all that. You know about anarchy, right? Your family's from Cuba.
Yeah, I love anarchy.
And let's remember, folks,
What does that have to do with Cuba?
oh, nothing much. I'm just throwing Cuba in there because we were discussing them earlier because of the fact that Trump is now declaring Cuba a terrorist state and will not grant immigration status to people who are trying to leave. And like you said, people are leaving in droves right now, which is actually it's a drove boat, I think what it is. They can't swim there, and they tried that; it didn't work. And I think that would be just wonderful if we could just get more Cubans into Florida because we don't got enough in Miami right now. That's why there's still salami still being served in some of the Cuban sandwiches in
I
South
know
Florida.
not in South Florida, in Tampa. Are you kidding me? You get punched in the face if you put salami in a Cuban in Miami.
I've never gotten punched in the face on the Calle Ocho. Maybe
Uh,
it's because everybody is so coffeeed up, you know.
that's rare, dude. That's rare. I think if I saw you on Coyote, I'd punch you in the face. I'd
Well,
be honest with you.
besides the fact that Cuba is getting even more fucked up than it was before, and and the fact that we have lost an hour. What also happened this last week was the first week of session. That's when they take all the new legislature and they put all the culture items in the front and the really important stuff in the back. And we always try to push the things that go forward. And we got a whole bunch of bills filed this last year. And we have other bills that we're going to be entering into other bills. And so we have the whole list here of bills that we're going to be working on. And our guest today is Michael Minardi, who is not yet online.
Yeah, maybe it
So
had
we're going to talk shit
something
about
to
him for a while.
maybe it had something to do with the daylight savings or spring sailing. What?
It could have to do with he still thinks it's an hour behind, in which case, he's screwed. So we have to do this on our own. And our executive director, Chris Cano, is right now working on a internet issue in Annapolis or in Montgomery County, wherever he is,
You
Anne
see,
Arundel County.
what it was is that Cano is a Democrat, Minardi is a Republican, right? They didn't want to be seen in the same podcast together, so they both decided that they were going to have internet issues or just sleep in. So I don't know. They're fucking friends. I'm trying to
Well,
figure out why it's only you and me right now.
well, I can tell you one thing. I was thinking of actually putting up a paddle that says "lie," uh, but I think that is probably one of the dumbest ideas that the Democratic Party has come up with, as far as a way to push back on the things. I am considering trying to find a congressman who will file a bill for me nationally that has the president of the United States actually um, swear in before the the State of the Union address. So if he is caught lying to Congress, he can be held liable. But unfortunately, I think
He can say whatever he wants. It doesn't even matter what's a lie or fact anymore. You know, as long as Trump says it, somebody's going to believe it. As long as somebody disagrees with him from the left, then the right is going to believe it even more. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. I
that's all
don't.
he needs.
It's amazing how that works. It's like, oh look, the sky is yellow. No, it isn't. Wait a minute. The president says it is. Okay, it's yellow. Piss yellow or hair yellow or orange skin orange. Don't know. I've been told
Or
I have
even
this.
worse, like the liberals are saying the sky is blue. It must be yellow.
Yes,
You
I've
know?
been told that I have Trump derangement syndrome. If that means that I'm pissed at everything he's doing, yeah, I don't see any wrong with being with reacting properly to that.
Here's my thing, man. Like I'm honestly like I'm done getting upset about politics. I made the decision as you guys were trying to convince me to go to Tallahassee last week, and now it's like, nah, I don't want to fucking go. I made the decision that I am just I am rooting for everybody. It doesn't matter. DeSantis, Trump. I want it to work out. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
well,
I I I disagree with what they're doing. I don't think it's going to work out. I don't think the best way to make the government more efficient is to cut a bunch of programs that we need. Um, but I don't know. Maybe.
I agree. Well, I actually went last time I was in Tallahassee. I sat down and talked with my representative for Hernando County, John Temple, and I said, "Do you believe in policy over politics?" He said, "Absolutely." I said, "Then we can talk," because at the end of the day, the politics is not the thing; it's the policy. It's what
Mhm.
they develop, and that's why we should work on both sides of the aisle to get things done that have to get done. The politics shit, let that happen during election time and all that kind of stuff. Let's just get to work here and start taking care of people and start taking care of the state of Florida and put the politics aside and just get the damn policy done. And that's what I hope to do. That's why I'm an independent officially, because I want to be able to criticize both sides, and I will, because that's the only way that system really works. Is if we,
Mhm.
we we debate each other not on a political basis, but on a policy basis, like saying, "Look, the policy you're putting together is shit. Let's fix it." Not you're a Republican, I don't want to talk to you, or you're a Democrat, I don't want to talk to you. That's not how it's going to work. So
Mhm.
that's why we got all these bills here today, and that's why we are going to get things fixed. Now, I did forget to introduce ourselves because we're waking up in the morning all pissed this morning, but it's the way it works. At least I am. I haven't had my dabs like you have. But my name is Gary Stein. I am the political director for Suncoast Normal and our master of public health.
You heard it.
Yeah, I heard that. And to my left, your right, probably, is our deputy director, our master of business administration, and the entrepreneur that has brought us Chillum CBD dispensary and mushroom dispensary in Ybor and St. Petersburg.
Woo! Thank you,
Now,
everybody. Hi.
there you go. How is business down there right now, by the way?
It's not very good.
Is it slow just in general? I mean, are there not enough drunks to fill Ybor City on Saturday night?
No, there isn't. There isn't. There's an entire block that has no businesses in it, right on Seventh Ave. They've successfully kicked out a number of the businesses that were operating out here. The result has been less people coming out here, and nobody's taking up these spots. So hopefully, sooner or later, we'll get more business out here. Hopefully, sooner or later, we'll get more residents out here. I think that's the plan: is to get more residents out here, and then possibly more businesses will move in.
Well, I
But
noticed that
slow as shit, dude.
I'm wondering if it has to do with the increase in price in Canadian liquor.
Maybe I don't know.
I mean,
I
the
doubt it.
tariffs haven't hit yet, but things continue to rise on an exponential basis lately. I think almost in anticipatory. So they could, have extra money in their hands to go ahead and pay off the tariffs by making certain that we pay more ahead of time as opposed to during
But
the time.
that doesn't necessarily work with liquor, right? Like liquor actually goes up in hard times.
Yeah. Now, I did see an interesting thing on Facebook the other day when someone had said that maybe we should get DeSantis to file a bill to get rid of all Canadian cannabis companies working in Florida.
Hey, I agree.
Now, understand that even though they are on the Canadian Stock Exchange, the CSE, that does not make them a Canadian company. What makes them an American company is if they're registered to buy and sell cannabis on a vertical basis in the state of Florida. So therefore, anybody operating in Florida is de facto a Floridian company, even though they are multi-state organizations, because the one they have here, unfortunately, is Floridian. So
Well, that
it doesn't
confuses
work.
me a little bit because if they wanted to raise money, they could sell stock on the Canadian Stock Exchange.
Yeah, that's the way that they generate funds is through the Canadian Stock Exchange. But as far as whether or not it's a Canadian company or not, is debatable because of the fact that they are actually licensed to work and sell booth here in the state of Florida. And I'm hoping that will change. From what I understand, of the 22 new licenses, they actually haven't come on board yet. But here's the good news, guys. Most of those licenses are for sale. They waited a fucking year and a half for their licenses to be granted to them after they put in their application, after they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to get those applications put through and all that bit, and have people help them, just so they can go ahead and sell them. That's how important the market is, and you are to them. So, welcome the new boss, same as the old boss, right? That's where that's where we stand. But we want to change things. We do want to change things,
Bullshit.
and that's why we went ahead and put out some bills this next year, this last year. I don't know if you have the graphic that I sent you about all the bills that are coming up right now. So I have it on my right screen over here.
Where'd you send it?
Oh, I don't know. It was sometime earlier this week when I sent you a list of all the cannabis bills that got filed. They had red stars on the far right hand side.
To my email.
I think it was in our chat.
Oh well, then I don't have it on here.
No problem. Let's start with the beginning.
And my phone's dead.
There you go.
So yeah, tell me about the bills, Gary.
I'm scrolling down to the top. The first one that got filed this year, very, very early, was HB 83, protections for public employees who use marijuana as qualified patients. And Minardi, if he was here, would be talking a lot about this because of the fact that he just had a case that went through Hillsborough County of a EMT that was registered to work with Hillsborough County that got fired for testing positive during the week. And what happened was Hillsborough County said that firing was not legitimate because of heck he needs to use it for medical reasons. And so therefore he should be allowed to work. And that's really important. I mean, people are worried so much about whether or not people can work if they are using cannabis medically. I know a lot of guys who are in sensitive jobs. They don't smoke when they're on the job. They don't smoke when they're on call, just in case they have to run in or whatever, so that they are, in full clarity when they get to work. And performance is really the important thing here, right? It's not so much what you use for medication, because I know a lot of guys who are using Adderall before they get to work. I know a lot of guys that are using opioids before they get to work. They aren't tested. They aren't tested at all, but they have no problem with that. And they can say, "Oh yeah, I'm using the hydrocodone because I have a bad back." Okay, that's fine, but can you really operate the heavy machinery?
I think the argument too is that even though it's a scary pharmaceutical, that because it's like under the supervision of a doctor, that it's okay.
Exactly right.
But still,
don't worry, you can always get it without a doctor. I think you can get it from Hims now too.
The what?
No, I'm just saying that there are alternate means to get opioids, especially in the state of Florida, who had a pill mill problem and still has somewhat of a pill mill problem, more on the trapper side. But still, the fact is, you can still get opioids outside of the minimal prescriptions you get from your doctor once you get hooked. But the good news is that cannabis is not addictive. It's and it does allow you to actually think clearly and operate very well and live without PTSD so that you can do your job well. I mean, let's look at our first responders, the folks who work like EMTs and things of that sort. They cannot unsee the things they've seen. They deal with shadows of the things that they have had to deal with at work, and many of them have PTSD,
Mhm,
especially our vets who have jobs in the government who are now going away, unfortunately.
mhm.
But that's another issue altogether. Yes, a lot of vets are losing their jobs for no reason other than the fact that they've just been in their current position for less than 2 years, or other people I know who have been in their business in their jobs now for decades and are suddenly losing their jobs because somebody in DC with a bunch of little kids running around them and with backpacks full of I don't know what video games are are chopping them, taking their jobs to the chopping block for no reason. The good news is that some of them are being forced to give their jobs back through the judges, but a lot of people are getting hurt, and a lot of those who are getting hurt are vets. And for all those folks who've been texting me saying, "Yeah, Gary, you're not a vet, so you can't defend vets," fuck you. Okay,
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that, but I do have a
it's a
question for
talking
you,
point on the
Gary.
right.
I do have a question for you, Gary Bear.
Mm.
Have you ever tried kratom before?
Yes, tastes like shit.
Yeah, it tastes horrible, and the kratom's kind of like a controversial thing. Like a lot of people who use kratom really fucking like it, but you hear a lot of rumors about it. I honestly I think it's highly addictive, and it operates off of opioid receptors. So some people who promote kratom promote it in such a way that it's not as even though it affects opioid receptors, it's not something that you should necessarily be worried about. But their talking points are a lot like Pfizer Pharmaceutical on like a lot of their opioid products. Oh, it only tickles the receptors. It's not as bad. And I've heard things about it like, it's like I want to say that I heard that it was like 3 times stronger than morphine or something. Like if you get like a kratom extract, like and I've done kratom before. I've drank kratom before. I've gotten all muddy and it felt like, I was fucking fucked up. Um,
Did you get jitters? Like too many
but that's what I'm about to say.
Vibrant?
If you drink kratom and you go into work and you haven't had your kratom, you're jittery. Like that, I've had people before that have needed to have kratom on the clock before they get back to be able to perform their duties here at work. So I'm wondering why are we like cruising over kratom so quickly? You know what I mean? Like, why doesn't anybody seem to care if like people are fucked up on kratom at work and everybody cares about if you're high at work?
I think it
And
has to do with the amount of kratom that's being sold. I mean, kratom is cheaper by the half ounce than a lot of the other things that are out there. And yeah, it does act very similar in effect to the way that tobacco also generates receptors in the brain, and that if you don't get enough nicotine into those receptors, you're going to feel jittery and nasty as hell. And that's why people say, "Oh yeah, I smoke because it calms me down." No, it smokes because you're a nicotine addict, and if your brain doesn't get enough nicotine, it starts going ape shit on you. That
and
is the way that nicotine slows you down. And I
also though,
personally prefer to be a coffee addict.
it's hard for me to like compare because I used to smoke cigarettes and I had a job once that did not allow me to smoke while I was on the clock. Like the whole thing was, I was a waiter, so I couldn't smell like cigarettes on the floor.
In a steakhouse, I want you to know this.
No,
In a
this was actually
steakhouse.
I could smoke at the steakhouse. I couldn't smoke at California Pizza Kitchen. And
Oh,
but you'd go through the entire shift and I wouldn't get jittery or anything like that. Like I would really want a cigarette when we were done with the shift. But I could get through the shift without being like oh god, I gotta fucking have it. I'm telling you, dude, these people that use kratom have to fucking have it. They have to. It's an addiction. And then I can't think of a situation other than high amounts of pain where and I've brought this up before about the whole thing. Would you want your pilot to have just smoked a joint? Like if you were going to get on a plane and you found out that the pilot had just smoked a joint, would you stay on? My answer has always been, I need more information about the pilot. You know, if the pilot suffers from ADHD, I'd actually feel better that he just smoked a joint.
Yeah, that way you can focus.
Yeah, that way he'd be able to do his job better.
Barry Gordon posted something very interesting. You see that?
Oh, I haven't looked yet. No.
He says there's a synthetic kratom extract called 7-OH.
7-OH.
By the way, I saw somebody buy
People
at
have tried to
7-Eleven a can of Four Loko. I thought they got rid of Four Loko. Didn't they make it illegal? But it's Four Loko, for you guys who never heard about it,
Four Loko, they,
is
like, changed it.
basically an alcoholic drink with caffeine in it, so you can stay awake and be drunk.
People have tried to sell me this 7-OH before, and I've stayed away from it. But you know, I won't sell kratom in these stores. I won't do it. I'll go broke before that happens. But you know, like, what's what I'm trying to figure out. It's like, why is smoking weed so bad? Like, why is it that you can't? And you know what? Similarly, if I showed up to that California pizza kitchen job, the managers didn't, and I was stoned out of my fucking mind. The managers didn't give a shit. They didn't care.
Well, this is California Pizza Kitchen, you know, where they go up to the table. It's like, dude, you want some like pine nuts on that? And
it's like, you want extra guacamole on your pizza, brah. No, but you get my point,
more
right?
mellow than the mellow mushroom. Absolutely.
Why is cannabis such a big deal? And you know, and the whole thing with Minardi's case, Minardi, there was a firefighter, was it, that tested positive, not necessarily like he was caught smoking on the job.
EMT for Hillsborough County.
Oh, okay, EMT. It wasn't necessarily that he was caught smoking weed on the job. It was that he tested positive for cannabis, right?
That was the whole thing, and that was in 2019,
and
it took until now to get recompense for him losing his job.
And he had a medical card. He proved that there was a medical reason why he needed cannabis.
That's right.
So what is the big deal?
He was EMT.
I don't know.
It doesn't have to be EMT or a DMT.
You're an honorable purveyor, Carlos. Thanks for maintaining your standards. EMT on DMT. That wasn't what happened. It was an EMT on cannabis.
Oh, I got it. Okay. Yeah, I not even focusing.
All right. So
I lost an hour of sleep, you know.
So, and to be clear too, like this bill that we're talking about, the House Bill 83, it would only be for
government workers. However, they are considering adding a carve out that will allow people who are first responders, because of the fact that if they can smoke again when they're not on duty and not on call. So, and of course, for that, we actually had to go to the head of the governmental operations committee, who said, but isn't cannabis a hallucinogen that's going to make our first responders start seeing things that aren't there? And I had to say, no. Cannabis is not a hallucinogen. It's a euphoric. And no, you don't see things that are not there. You actually may see things with greater clarity. And your brain may be on decision-making power on hyperbolically. But
now we're talking EMT on DMT.
I gotcha.
Psychedelic.
Yeah, psychedelics. So we had to explain to them that, you know, cannabis is not a hallucinogen, and you're not going to get flashbacks like you do on acid, you know, several days after you dose. So that you may get euphoric during the dose and things of that sort, but when you're at work and the PTSD is calmed down in your brain, you will be the best you could possibly be, the best of the best of the best. And we want to preserve those people who are able to do that. It's kind of like knocking people down as DEI hires because of the fact that they have a disability. Yeah, guess what? A air traffic controller who's in a wheelchair could probably do as good, if not better, of a job, if not the best job of any of the air traffic controllers in that whole terminal, because it's not the disability that defines his ability to work. That's why the DEI thing is bullshit.
Well, like I was just about to say, like this has This is only for discriminating against government employees. This isn't for if you're a private business and you still want to discriminate against cannabis consumers.
Well, that's the point. If we can get
You
this through
can't.
for government workers, then we have a precedent that we can move forward to get other people, other private industries to say, "Oh, if the federal government is doing it, we should do it too," because they have to have their own internal policy when it comes down
Yeah.
to it. Otherwise, they have what's called due cause as far as whether you're going to fire somebody. So, Rep. Mitch Rosenwald of South Florida is the one who filed this for us, and he is now waiting to get agendaed into the Government Operations Committee, and we are currently working with him to get it into the committee so we can get it to move forward on the other committees that are involved in it. And it was also filed in the Senate as well on SB 142 by Senator Polsky, who's also having the same issue right now as far as getting it in the first committee, which always seems to be the first thing. But once we get it into the first committee, we can do that. And that's where you guys come in. We need you guys to start contacting the folks who are in charge of these committees where the bills got to go to first, because they've got to go through the committee and they've got to hear from you, because a lot of them, with all due respect, do not have a clue when it comes to what is going on in regards to cannabis. A lot of them, they only care what their lobbyists come by and tell them. And like, for instance, we had a big committee meeting this last week in regards to hemp, and the liquor industry was there. And they're basically trying to protect their interests, say, look, hemp you're selling to kids. We're the alcohol industry. That never happens with us. Alcohol is so much safer than cannabis. Go with us, right? That's where they stand.
I don't
So
understand what you mean by that though. Like, so they're saying we don't need hemp because we have alcohol. 'Cause that's what it
what they're
is.
saying is
Making
they
it
want
sound
us to buy alcohol and fuck hemp. That's
like.
that, that's the folks in the alcohol industry are saying. That's what Debbie Wasserman Schultz, with all due respect, she's a nice lady. She's short like I am, and also Jewish. But the fact is, she is a pimp for the liquor industry, and
Mhm.
I'm sorry that doesn't fly with me. And to say that the alcohol and cannabis cannot live in the same world, I disagree that entirely.
Well, one of the hemp bills says that only bars can sell hemp drinks, right?
Yeah, yeah, they're getting into the hemp drinks as well. I did not get a chance to hear the entire thing. I highly recommend if you go to the Florida channel and get a chance to listen to it. You'll hear a lot of misinformation, and what I say is recognize the source. Okay, people work in their self interest, especially in business, and so if you notice, a lot of the misinformation is coming from competing industries, not necessarily concerned individuals. Not that there aren't any concerned individuals, but there aren't. So we have those two bills, and that is again to keep public employees at this point in time, and hopefully others, to not lose their job or not get their job because of the fact they happen to have a medical cannabis card. Another
Mhm.
issue that has been very big, as far as we're concerned, is on SB 146, protection of parental rights, which was also filed by Representative Campbell as where is it? SB 99 HB 993 in the House, and that is protection of parental rights. And basically, if the Department of Children and Families knocks on your door for whatever reason, and they're checking to make certain that your kids are fine, and they see that you have a medical cannabis card, they could possibly, at this point in time, take your kids away from you, where you lose parental rights just because of the fact that the parents are using cannabis medicinally, because they're concerned, of course, so they claim, that the kids are going to have access to to your medicine. And I think most folks who use cannabis medicinally, are smart enough and careful enough to not give their kids access to their medicine, which they desperately need. It's kind of like the old Halloween farce where people who are buying cannabis for medical use are giving it away to kids on Halloween, because nothing says I love my kids in the neighborhood like giving away your own medicine at at $20 a jar for 10 of them. It just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. So basically, what this says is if the only thing that they can see of concern is that the parents are using cannabis, that's not good enough to file a petition to have your kids taken away. And that is so important, not only for that particular situation, but also in regards to situations where it's a custody battle between parents, and you can't have one parent using against the other one, but one of them has a medical card. Because quite frankly, what it comes down to is what makes you a better parent. I think being well, mentally, behaviorally, makes you a better parent. Wouldn't you agree with that, Carlos?
This shit's so confusing.
Well, I mean, it is.
They want to still use it as an excuse to take your kids away, but as long as there's something else happening.
Yeah, exactly right. If they're gonna take your kids away, there has to be something else happening. Violence in the home, watching too much Fox News, whatever they want to do.
That sounds to me like if they get a complaint, uh Gary doesn't clean his house enough.
This is true.
Right. And he's got kids in the house, right?
Yes.
So then DCF comes out to your house, Gary, and it's like, oh yeah, fucking smells like shit in here. There's fucking clothes all over the floor. And you smoke weed, we're gonna take your kids away. Like that's what it sounds like to me. Is that's a possibility?
Yeah.
Jesus fucking Christ, dude.
But
I mean,
what we're talking,
it's a step in the right direction, blah blah blah. It's not like they can be like, oh, Gary's on the rotation, so he obviously smokes weed and we're going to take his kids away.
I mean, we actually had a situation in Ohio when we lived there. Our youngest daughter required nursing care 16 hours a day because she had a trach in her neck, tracheostomy. And we had these people living in our house all the time. And every once in a while, there would be one that actually contacts CMS and saying things like, these people don't celebrate Christmas. I think they're really doing a disservice to their kids. And then they say, oh, yeah, there's not enough food in the house, too. And, of course, CMS would knock on our door. They'd walk to the kitchen, and they'd see that the refrigerator is stocked to the hilt. And they'd say, I don't know why I'm here. I'd say, dude, we have a nurse who's pissed we aren't celebrating Christmas, so they went ahead and faked something else for you to come out here. There's no problem here. But they have to come out when they're asked to come out. That's what it comes down to. And if they see that someone is using cannabis is in the house and has a medical card, that shouldn't make a goddamn bit of difference because that makes that person a better parent. And I sincerely doubt that the kids are getting access to your stuff. Sorry, it's not happening. That's why we're all in on getting the protection of parental rights that is filed by Polsky in the Senate and Campbell in the House. And if you want to go ahead and contact either Daryl Campbell or Tina Polsky, please do that and show them your support and find out what you can do to make sure that they get into committee. Now, the next one is filed by
Gary's a heathen and smokes weed, so he can't take care of kids.
I am not a heathen.
That's what. No, you are a heathen because you don't believe in Jesus.
Ah, Jesus.
I'm a heathen too.
Well, you don't believe in anything. Well, actually, the great spaghetti monster, right?
And
mushrooms.
That's just a joke. And oh yeah, that's right. I pray to mushrooms now. Okay. Yeah, never mind. I'm a heathen because I pray to mushrooms.
I think everybody should. I think anybody who can even spell ayahuasca should be, lauded.
Or DMT.
I can't spell DMT. But the next bill was Gruder's. When he was on our show a couple months ago, he talked about the fact that he was to put this bill through because at that point in time, they didn't know if Amendment 3 was going to go through or not. And he wanted to make certain that Tampa was not going to be a place where you could just go dank, no matter where you were, up, down, downtown, Ybor City, etc. Of course, the streets of Ybor never smell like dank, right?
I mean, they smell like piss and shit.
There are places I go to in the Tampa Bay area right now where it is out there. But the fact is, he's trying to make it about, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to make certain that nobody can smoke anything like on public beaches and stuff because they heard about, whoa, look at that.
There he is. Can you hear us?
Hey, Mike.
I can hear you guys.
Sweet.
Okay, yeah.
Daylight savings time today, huh?
You didn't jump forward, did you?
No, I did not.
Yeah, Musk stole the hour between 2 and 3. So that's what happened.
So Gary, I believe this warrants a proper introduction.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, coming to us from Ybor City, or close to it anyway, West Tampa, is our friend of the show and oftentimes guest, Michael Minardi, cannabis attorney extraordinaire, one of the few people who's actually won a lot of jury cases here in the state of Florida. And the last one that he did was a killer. And we were talking about the one in regards to the EMT. We just passed it. But I want you to give us your take as to how it happened and what is going to be the impact of this case.
Well, it happened because someone had courage to fight the system. And that's really how all of these sort of law changing, constitutional challenge questions happen, is because people have courage to fight. And that was first and foremost, because, you could easily go back, get your job. All you have to do is stop smoking cannabis and then you can go and work again. But he did not want to do that. So we stepped to the table and we challenged it. And the biggest problem that I have, Gary, with these policies and procedures throughout the state is that typically they say you can't use illegal drugs or you can't be under the influence while you're employed. Almost everyone in the state says that. And so we challenged it based on the constitutional amendment and based on the own language of their contract and policies and procedures that they had. So, and we were luckily victorious, at least at this point. It is on appeal to the First District Court of Appeal, but that, Second District Court of Appeal. But that opinion did, lay the groundwork potentially for protections of all employees, either that are contractual or a state-run organization.
Yeah, and that is so important because that includes, like EMTs and other first responders who obviously have a much higher rate of PTSD than other jobs.
It is, and never mind, especially firefighters and stuff, they're always using their body and jumping and running into fires, carrying hoses and stuff. So they have a lot of physical, injuries as well, chronic pain. But it hopefully will, and the appellate court has to make that decision, and then probably will try to get it up to the Supreme Court, either side, depending on what happens, to get a final ruling throughout the state. But the ruling in that case, to me, is just, Gary, it's all that we've been looking for and trying to get for the past 10 years for employee rights. It clarifies the constitutional amendment, requires that employers accommodate off-site use for medical marijuana patients. And that's under the amendment. Under the Florida Civil Rights Act, she determined that he was a disabled individual through his PTSD and other ailments that provide him rights under the Florida Civil Rights Act. And some of the best things that she did was acknowledging our constitutional amendment and then looking at the definitions in Florida statute under 893.02 of prescription and non-prescription drug, and the definition of use. Right. So, and under the amendment, again, back to that, not accommodate on-site use. So as long as they weren't using on-site or not under the influence of substance while they were working, she found that they had a constitutional right and under contractual right under this agreement to be able to use cannabis off-site, and that accommodation would be allowing them to test positive. That's what we're requesting.
Now, you helped us craft the bill that we have that is now currently filed and awaiting for first committee. And one of the things we discussed, of course, was the federal Americans with Disabilities Act, which basically states that you must have accommodations on the job if you have a disabling condition. And by definition, in order to be a medical cannabis patient, you have to have a disabling condition. So therefore, putting those two together, since federal law does supposedly trump state law, we automatically have that in its place as well, correct?
Yeah, and just so you know, the Florida Civil Rights Act is basically a model of the Americans with Disabilities Act. We cannot bring a suit under the American Disabilities Act because of the Schedule I nature of the substance. So you have to file under state law.
Okay, so that's where it stands right now as far as that's concerned.
And that really is the big deal, that there's a fly fucking bothering me. That's the big deal, right? Like that's,
yeah, we all see the fly.
Schedule I substance, right?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any rules about like consuming kratom on the job?
No, there are not.
All
So,
right.
and technically, and this is the biggest thing that I deal with regularly when I'm asked for questions, right? Because that's a legal substance, kratom.
Right.
Right. So technically, you can't be under most job policies. You can't be under the influence of any illegal or over-the-counter substance in a lot of them. Um, and that was another thing that helped us in this case with regards to cannabis, right? Because the definition under 893.02 of prescription or non-prescription drug includes any of those things that are widely available and distributed for medical use in the state of Florida, either federally legal or state. So that did help us. So realistically, with kratom or other substances, and this is the same thing that we go with on the hemp, right? So technically, and I haven't had one of these cases yet, if you are only using hemp and you test positive for hemp, what then becomes the argument of these entities? So it may be better for people to say that they were using hemp than using medical marijuana and having a medical card. Because number one, hemp, they can't prove if you say, hey, I use hemp products, non-intoxicating hemp products, but you will still test positive for THC, that they cannot prove you're using a illegal substance. It's number one, 100% federally legal. So there's no argument that it violates Schedule 1 substance. So these are things that we haven't dealt with that'll configure that I think will at some point in time be raised. I'm really amazed that someone hasn't been fired specifically just for hemp. And I think a lot of people who are using hemp are also medical marijuana patients too. So they provide that medical marijuana patient protection instead of saying that, hey, I just use hemp.
Well, I have no doubt that there has been people who have been fired for hemp use, but have not come forward because they're trying to get their job back, or not trying to ruffle the feathers or poke the bear, so they can't get another job in the same industry. So they're keeping quiet after they've gotten fired for this because they don't want to be labeled as a stoner and not get a job elsewhere.
Yeah, that is a possibility. Absolutely. I'm just surprised we haven't even had any calls about it. Realistically, we've had dozens and dozens of calls about employee issues and with regards to medical marijuana, but none on the hemp issue.
Well, this was a guy who was working for the Hillsborough County.
Yes.
What about folks who are not involved in government? Can we use the bill if this goes forward to help get action on those folks who are in private industry?
So, Florida is a really tough issue with that. So we've dealt with a lot of contracts now too, that they specifically disclaim that the employee agreement is a contract and that Florida is an at-will state, right? So typically they have no reason to fire you except for discrimination. So that employee, that private versus public, is still a little bit difficult right now. And that would more depend on the contractual statements in the policy that would potentially provide help, because the Florida Civil Rights Act is mostly just for public entities.
Well, I do know that there are some folks who are working contractually with the state of Florida, in particular, to case management for child protection.
Yep.
And they went through Eckerd, I guess that was the contract that was there at that time, which means they weren't officially a government employee, but they still had a zero tolerance policy, and they still took this person's certification away for a year and things of that sort. So it's not only just government employees, but also people who are in contract with government employees who can be affected by this, right?
Correct, because then it goes to a breach of contract depending on the terminology of their contract. And just like the one in this case, again, it says not using illegal intoxicants or being under the influence of at work is usually the two different phrases that we see in contracts that we say, okay, well, he has no proof that he's using at work. There's no proof that he's ever been under the influence at work. And he has otherwise a legal right to use it. So it's not an illegal substance. So those are really the three things that we hone in and harp on in these lawsuits and when I'm reviewing policies that people have sent me. But when it says, there's a lot of them now that I'm finding that say this is not a contract between the parties. Florida is still an at-will state. This is basically guidelines. And so it's really harder to create a contract out of that type of agreement as opposed to one that doesn't have that language.
Now, we're trying to get this into committee, and I mentioned before that the head of that committee, Rep. Cheney,
Yes.
is concerned that this is actually a hallucinogen, or people will be getting flashbacks throughout the week if they dose on Sunday. That's the kind of misinformation that we deal with on a daily basis. And
Yeah. I stopped by her office when I was there on Wednesday or Wednesday. So I left a message with her. I have her AIDS card, and I am going to send him an email with the case and some additional information on it.
and Rep. Dottie Joseph, I guess, is also the Democratic majority as far as the Democratic leader of that committee as well. And she is more in favor of us, and I hope that we can get her to tip the scales as well.
Well, it just becomes a considered ignorance, hypocrisy, and discrimination. And you can't say it any other way, Gary, because, as you know, and as we know, people who actually deal with patients on a regular, consistent basis, people are using cannabis so they can get up out of their wheelchairs, out of their beds, off their chronic medication, and back to work. People makes them feel more useful and able to get out there, and still it reminds me of Bridget Kerouac's case years ago when she was on the stand. She's like, it makes me feel useful to my husband. Like, and these people just want to be able to survive. They want to take care of their families, and they want to work. And for one of the safest therapeutic medications to be what's preventing them from doing so, when they can otherwise take all the opiates, all the Xanax and stuff that they want, and it's not a problem for these employers, it becomes a serious issue.
And so we're going to try to move forward with that. And the next bill that we talked about before that I want to just backtrack to is protection of parental rights, which we also discussed a lot of the case law that brought this forward. And the fact that we actually have quite a few states that already have provisions in law and codified that you cannot take your kids away just because you have a medical card or you're using it medicinally.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any states that also allow it recreationally or not, but I'll have to look forward to that. But we're basically talking about people who have a medical card. It should not affect their ability to be a parent, and it should not be cause termination of parental rights, which is something that's very hard to get back once you take that genie out of the bottle.
It is, and it
Correct
is
me-
something.
Correct me if I'm wrong. That's something you see quite a bit, right? Like somebody who's a patient gets their kids taken away because
Yeah, we've had a few cases throughout the state in it, and really this becomes a county by county issue. My position is obviously like this is the only medication that we as Floridians have a constitutional right to. I mean, and most courts laugh at me when I say that, but like, okay, Judge, what other medication is in our Constitution? What other medication says that no, they're not subject to any criminal, civil liability, or sanctions by using medical marijuana in accordance with our constitutional amendment? And they're like, yeah, but it's not federally legal. Well, I don't care about that, and so these are issues that are occurring regularly, but it is a county by county issue. And for years, this has been, even prior to. The law is really clear that unless they can show a detrimental effect on the child, that drug use isn't sufficient to terminate parental rights. The issue becomes that their position is, well, they're using it, they're causing it causes them to fall asleep, it causes them to be unattentive, they don't know what's going on. And it really just becomes this misconception that cannabis users are just like lost in the wilderness and don't know what's going on and can't take care of their children. When most parents know that who use cannabis, that it's actually, probably makes them a better parent.
And I know that the state legislature has at least one bill every year having to do with divorce proceedings and custody in particular, and talking about how long those custody things can be withheld and that kind of thing. And they're constantly trying to make it easier for divorces to go through that don't have major long-standing impact on the parents. And I'm hoping that this will also fold into that as well.
Yeah, I've seen that in a couple divorce cases. We don't do divorce, so we will guide people on that. I don't know the ultimate resolution of it, But, the bottom line continues to be that this is a constitutional right, that we have parents' rights bills, and that realistically, you really don't see any effect on the child on these issues. So it really becomes like in Pensacola, they terminated a parent's rights, and that was just upheld on appeal for realistically the most absurd case I've ever seen. I cannot believe we lost it. But when you're in a corrupt area with corrupt courts and corrupt judges that don't care and don't like cannabis in any form, it doesn't matter to them what you say or what the science is. We even had Dr. Uma on board, who testified that, just because the child had tested positive, it's our position this autistic child was using CBD products, and they still got rights terminated.
Wow.
That you can't tell whether or not it was CBD or cannabis, etc. The child himself testified that they were never under the influence of cannabis, and the court really ignored it all. But honestly, it was a really gross case with those judges and how they were corrupt, and really just didn't care about a person's rights, but just cared about their own positions, ego, and bias towards cannabis.
Now, last week we had Josh Weil on. He's the guy who's running against Randy Fine right now for Congress. And I pulled out an old video from 2017 of my testifying in front of Health Policy, where Randy Fine said, are you guys at Suncoast Normal okay with kids smoking their medicine at school? And first off, I had to point out to them that you can't smoke anything at school. It's public. There's a no smoking on the campus policy for all smokables. But most kids who use cannabis usually are using pills or tinctures or things of that sort. But as of right now, because of the fact that there's a public use problem, that if a mom sees a kid having a seizure on a bus and she has a tincture of THC in her pocket, if she pulls that out and gives the kid a tincture on the bus, she can be arrested for a felony, can't she?
So technically, if the school doesn't have, so schools are allowed to, pursuant to 381.986, create their own policies for it. We have dealt with this in a couple schools over in Hillsborough County. Even after the law first got started, there was one school that was basically making the mother come in and check the kid out every day. So she would have to take him, check him out, basically go across the street, give him his meds, and then bring him back to school. They were then considering that like an absence. So the kid was having all these absences and stuff. So we dealt with that and we did those procedures. So these schools are supposed to have that. But Gary, again, it goes back to the ignorance of these issues and not understanding the impact of cannabis on these children, especially in that type of situation when they have an epileptic seizure, and you can take them out of seizure within 10 to 15 seconds, as opposed to, that long drawn out seizure that can cause them to injure themselves, never mind other medical effects on their body as a result. So you're right. Absolutely.
So we're going to be, again, pushing those bills ahead, and hopefully we'll get that going. We've already talked about smoking in public places that Gruner's put out, which basically he claims is a way to clean up the beaches, but nobody's putting cigarette butts on the beaches. But he's basically making it certain that nobody has access to any place outdoors to be able to utilize the product. And that's an issue because most people don't have any place right now to medicate unless they're staying at home in a place they actually own. Because if your landlord, who is not prohibited from kicking you out for using cannabis in the home, can deal with that. And so where do you go? If you go outside in your backyard, can you be arrested? If you go on a public sidewalk, can you be arrested? That is a situation we have here. And we have a lot of tourists who come here. They buy products from smoke shops. They buy, or they are giving it to them some other way, that can be arrested for just smoking on the street or taking a tincture on the street, or who knows. So I don't know if his bill necessarily will work, because how the heck do you enforce it? Except on a point-by-point basis.
Well, I think that this is a common problem in all states right now, because the states continue to be like, oh, well, it's legal and we'll take tax dollars or whatever, but we're still going to ostracize it. My belief from the beginning is that private establishments can determine their own rules and regulations regarding whether or not people can use hemp. We've spoken about this before. The amendment does say not required to permit public smoking. I do like that his bill did define public, right? So now we have an idea as to what is public. It is public parks, it's this and it's that. So we have an idea of it, right? So at least kind of clarifies that issue for people. But it's a huge problem, Gary, everywhere we go in this country, whether or not it still be Colorado. Vegas has a couple of social lounges, but otherwise, every hotel you're in, walking down the street, same thing in New York. It's an issue that we really have to deal with, as opposed to ignore and continue to try to make criminals out of these people doing something constitutionally illegal.
Now,
I
our-
think.
Go ahead,
Hold on.
Carlos.
I think this is like one of the newest forms of cannabis discrimination. And I think prohibition is particularly like this form of discrimination, because it could get people who are for legalization to be like, hey, there's still a problem here. And New York's a good example. I saw an interview with a comedian, Jim Gaffigan, of all people, who was like, I live in New York. I like legalized marijuana. That's fine. But, I just want to go down to the bodega and not smell it. But like we were talking about before, Gary, like, what does New York fucking smell like? Like, it's Ybor City here smells like fucking piss and fucking mold all the fucking time. It hasn't smelled like coffee since they got rid of the fucking coffee factory. So I would love to fucking smell weed while I'm walking around in Ybor City.
As a New York experience, right? You say, what does it smell like in New York? From New England, I've been there many times. I went to this place one day and I was eating, and towards the end of my meal, I noticed my rice was moving. It had maggots in it.
Oh my God.
So I
Right,
ran
the
out.
Big Apple.
I ran outside to get a breath of fresh air, but all it smelled like was garbage. So that's how I think New York smells like, and I love New York, but wow. I think cannabis, the odor of cannabis would be a huge benefit to the streets of that place.
New York City in particular is like, you can't argue that it doesn't smell like shit out there. Like, just by the way it was designed. Like, there's not a lot of alleys in that city.
And I love
There's
New
a lot of
Orleans. The
garbage
problem
in
is in New Orleans, you get a choice of the smell of beer or the smell of urine. Either way, depending on what corner you turn on Bourbon Street.
Oh my God. One time I was on Bourbon Street, which, and I was younger, total mess, drunken mess. We saw a dude basically bleeding out on the roadway. He fell and hit his head on the curb or something, was bleeding out. And the cops were everyone's yelling and screaming, like crowds of people. And the cops are just like nonchalantly walking over, like, like didn't even care. And
If you were smoking a joint, though,
yeah, right. It would have been like had the hit squad there, like 20 people.
No, and there's another talking point to this specific form of discrimination too, where like I've heard it before, where like in the 70s I didn't care about how pot smells, but now pot's so potent, it smells awful. It smells so crazy. I can't stand this. I wish there was some way that we could like make that specific talking point go away. Like we should engineer some cannabis that smells like, I don't know.
I think, like I said, you should have something in your shop where people get a choice to be able to smell one of 3 pots, one of which has urine in it, one that has beer in it, and one that has terpenes in it, and ask them which one smells the best.
Right.
I guarantee you the terpene will win out every damn time. It's not a normal smell, but give them the options.
And so the other thing with regards to the public smoking thing and stuff, there's some words in our constitutional amendment that have never really been implicated or defined. And I've been trying to get one of the MMTCs to kind of make this argument for a while, but under a medical marijuana treatment center actually means an entity that cultivates, possesses, processes, transfers, transports, sells, distributes, dispenses, or administers marijuana. Under Florida Statute 893.02, I think our MMTC should be able to have lounges and administer cannabis at this point under that section, because otherwise the definition of administer, and I've requested OMMU a couple times, et cetera, to tell me what that means. and they have no definition of it. Now, under Florida law, it means the direct application of a controlled substance, whether by injection, inhalation, ingestion, or other means, to the body of a person or animal. That's what it means. So I think that they should be able to administer it to someone so that they can use it on site.
I agree. That'd be awesome.
Now, the next bill that they have out here, of course, is well, first the marijuana products bill that was put in, and then it was yanked immediately afterwards by Grutter. So it had both the home grow bill and other food and hemp products bill in there. So he separated that out, and I'll be honest with you, he did refile the home grow bill. I'm not thrilled with the way it's set up. Number one, it says you can only have 2 plants, no matter how many patients there are in the house. And of course, in order to have that, you have to have a certificate from the Department of Agriculture, which means you have to have an inspector come to your house and inspect it to make certain that, first off, your grow can't be seen by anybody, even with binoculars.
Yep.
Now, I don't know how they're going around with binoculars looking at people's houses to see if you can see it, but as you remember from the lady's case over there on the west side of Florida, Kerouac, they actually peered into her garage because they said they smelled baby plants.
Yeah.
But
no baby plants.
Yeah, they followed her home from the grow shop, and then went back to her house at midnight and walked around the garage and allegedly smelled the odor of cannabis, which all of them at that point in time were not flowering. So I don't know how, but
like 7 years ago, I had cops show up at my house because there was like my AC broke, and I bought window units for my AC. So we went from like centralized air to like all these different units in the windows. There was a variance in my electric bill, and like there were a bunch of cops that showed up at my fucking house.
Yeah, the variance in electric bill is what they usually use to go ahead and find grow houses, because you have a massive drain in the neighborhood from one house. Those lights tend to take a lot of electricity.
It happens very few and often, Carlos. It does not happen often. I've only had like 3 electric bill cases in my career where they've showed up because of a spike in electric. So that's very interesting. They may have looked you up and knew who you were.
Well, the thing about it is my house was, at the time at least, it was registered as Normal's address. So that had something to do with it.
But that was not bright.
I actually wasn't there. My roommate was there, and he was fucking shitting in his fucking pants.
Right.
But he was like, "Hey, listen, like the cops are here and they want to talk to you." So he passed the phone over to the cop, and the cop was like, listen, I just need to be able to tell somebody that I looked inside your house. Right?
You.
And I was like, no, I'm not consenting to a search in my house. And he was like, no, you don't understand. He's like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to come back. He was like, if you let me look inside your house and there's no plants, right? We can forget about this whole situation. And I was like,
wow.
You understand I'm a medical patient, right? Like I have a card. And he's like, yeah, I understand that. If there's marijuana in the house, I'm only looking for plants. So
even crazier than Bridget.
I cannot believe you didn't call me, honestly.
Look what happened with Kathy and Bob Jordan. I mean, they actually had a cord running from one house to the other because they had just rented the house next door and they didn't have electricity yet. So they were running electricity over there so they could go ahead and clean up. And so somebody who came by to inspect the house, something like that, saw the cord going from one to the other, and they called the cops out because she looked in the garage and saw that they were actually growing something in the garage.
Well, no, it's actually all in their backyard. They looked through a hole in the fence, and all the plants are outside.
Oh, okay.
She had 100 plants outside, yeah.
Well, here's the question. Does the Department of Agriculture have the manpower to be able to inspect every single house of everybody who wants to home grow?
Ask anybody who no, not even close. It's insane at this point in time. But I think that's why at the hemp workshop the other day, where they were talking about increasing the taxes on hemp products, more similar to alcohol or tobacco, so that they would be able to further fund the Commission of Agriculture to be able to do those inspections. So, I think it's absolutely crazy and it's insane. We haven't had a patient who was arrested for cultivation either yet. I think that that's a very interesting challenge. And even though Joe Redner's case lost on that aspect, that was a civil case. And realistically, I think that there has to be a different interpretation between a civil case and a criminal case as to the implication of the law on a person. And as we all know, the way that they define marijuana, the way that our court decided patients couldn't cultivate, our Supreme Court, I think actually it was, I don't know if our Supreme Court issued an opinion or it was the appellate court and then the Supreme Court denied review. But they clearly said that, just because a patient can possess marijuana, which means any parts of the plant, whether growing or not, because separately in a separate section, it uses the word cultivate. That's the term of art for growing. If I do get that case at some point, will bring the position that in the industry, we don't use home cultivation when we're talking about home grow. We use home grow. And so that's actually a term of art in the industry, home grow, separate and apart from cultivation. Cultivation deals with businesses, home grow deals with individuals. Because a patient is supposed to be able to possess any and all parts of the plant, whether growing or not.
Yeah, you saw that whole hemp, well, not the whole thing, because it went on for several days. But
I did.
And there was a lot of misinformation spread out there, wasn't it?
Wow. So Mooney was awesome, man. We everybody in the hemp space should send him a thank you, because
That's why you were texting me.
I mean, this is the first legislator that I've seen since this stuff has started that seemed to actually have a clue and use common sense as to what's going on here. So yeah, misconceptions. I mean, Gary, these people think literally one of the dudes was like, oh, well, if you get these edibles and they're sitting in a truck or whatever, they're getting stronger and stronger over time. No, they're not. That doesn't happen with edibles. This transformation only happens with flower. Hemp flower will convert from THCA to Delta 9 or CBN or whatever. But this doesn't happen with edibles. Once they're in that inert package and they're processed, that's what they stay. Like, this is the ignorance that's going on with it, and it's absolutely ridiculous. They don't even understand. The other one was like, well, how are we even dealing with this when we had a vote? And I love it. One of them was like, and the majority doesn't support legalization. Like, hold on, 56% did. So that's clearly a majority. And yet we're dealing with we're legalizing the same product that the voters said no on. Right? He has no comprehension that this has been separated out and is no longer a controlled substance. That's what they can't get through their head. It's not a controlled substance. It's not under the Controlled Substance Act anymore, federally. So how they continue to treat it like it is, to me, is absolutely ridiculous.
What's facts out of context? We have a lot of hemp farmers who had their product rejected because they sent it out to be tested, and it was heated during time of transit and things of that sort. So the THCA got transferred to THC, and it ended up by being higher than 0.3%. And so therefore their entire crop was rejected from sale. So that's obviously what they're hinting at. But take it out of context, it's not have anything to do with edibles all of a sudden becoming super powerful because it's sitting in your car.
Wait, so what did Mooney say that was so great?
Honestly, Mooney, everything. Mooney was on top of every aspect of this space. Like honestly, I like any of us would have been there. He recognized the potency differences compared to alcohol versus this. He represented the constitutional legality of it. He understood, the aspect of the cultivation of it versus the processing of it. It was just, he really, if anyone represented the hemp space there, it was him. With knowledge and education on it, when they're talking about the different edibles and trying to pin down the dosing and stuff. He compared it to alcohol. You can get 2% beer, you can get 160% Everclear. He just did a great job in aspects of all of it, defending the rights of hemp consumers, small businesses as well. He didn't want to destroy small businesses throughout this state.
Yeah.
And really, I think I don't know if you saw, but the whole alcohol company thing that they're trying to get into and say that they should only be able to sell the drinks and beverages in their stores. And that's why I asked you that question about the 21 plus, Carlos, because they're like, oh, well, alcohol stores are 21 plus. And I'm like, really, because besides the gas stations and stuff, and realistically, if they stop the gas stations from selling it and stuff like that, that's one thing. But they also deal with alcohol and tobacco. They have to ID people and card people regularly for those things. So it's not like it's something that they don't do regularly. But with you guys, the majority of the people selling hemp only and that are surviving off of the hemp space are the head shops, are the CBD only stores and hemp only stores that really pretty much, I mean, that's why I thought it was 18, but like you guys, 21 plus to enter. So it's not even like kids are going in and buying these products. And that's another thing that I'd really like for them to clarify and try to find some evidence on, that there's any evidence that these hemp stores, because that's what they're blaming you guys on. Oh, these kids are getting it, and the kids are getting it, the kids are getting it. Well, that's a parent issue, because nobody is going into these hemp stores and buying these products from anybody that I know of.
It was
nobody sitting outside the shop saying, "Hey, would you go in there and buy me a couple of joints of THCA?"
And they should. Why not? They do it with alcohol. They absolutely should do that. And we should do the same thing. The way that we got to smoking tobacco, the lowest in the country among teens, education, strict compliance, and exactly that, doing stings that they can go in and make sure that these retail stores are acting responsibly.
Well, if you sell pipes, right, and you sell them for tobacco use, right, you're when the state went 21 and up for tobacco, essentially all head shops should have turned 21 and up.
Yep.
At least that's my opinion.
Yeah, and that's when you said for tobacco use, and this is very interesting because I was talking to an attorney the other day. He called me to clarify because I go into head shops and I say, "Oh yeah, I'm a patient." They're like, "No, we still can't say bong. We still can't say you're using this for cannabis." But that statute it's not correct, right? So technically, for smoking, our bill says that you don't have to buy it in an MMTC. You can buy it anywhere. Mm-hmm. So, that idea that we have to separate those two, if you're a medical patient, it's no longer paraphernalia.
Now, you've got 3 other bills that have come out in regards to hemp products concerned. You got Burton's bill. We have the identical bill that Trablusi put out. And we also have a bill that was put out by, Gruters withdrew his bill. Cassell, who jumped from the Democratic to the Republican Party, that's another issue altogether. But I think it's kind of like this was a gift from the speaker saying, "You want to come to our party? You got to pay the price."
2 of them.
So it was 601, and we got 1030, which is Davis's bill. Do you think any of these are going to be affected by this committee?
I don't really. I think that they're kind of going to sail through mostly. I think the hemp workshop the other day, at least in the House, was pretty clear that everyone felt something needed to be done. The good thing was that they agreed that it shouldn't be, and it's not going to be a total ban, which whether or not they can do. And this is what I tried to, and I sent Mooney an email. I'm like, realize that if they do that, the only thing that they're doing is destroying Florida businesses and empowering out-of-state businesses. Because even though they tried to say like, oh, okay, everything that gets sent in has to go through the Department of Agriculture or go through the hemp, inspection stations and stuff. And I'm like, UPS has been given guidance, and we won a case years ago, and I wasn't the lead attorney, but I was part of it. That UPS said this is a non-controlled substance. It can be mailed through UPS. So the only thing they're going to be, again, doing is destroying Florida businesses and empowering out-of-state businesses, because whoever wants these products can order them online 24/7. And I really don't know how they're going to enforce that, and if they even can, because of the protections in the Farm Bill of states can't interfere with interstate transportation and they can't interfere with interstate commerce. So
I want to chime in on that, Mike, because I was up here in Maryland, and they had a slew of cannabis bills being heard the other day. One of the bills that I was testifying on was about whether or not firefighters can use it off duty. And one of the bills that came up was around hemp regulation. In Maryland, the True Booth boilerplate bill that has been shopping all around the country, where only the MMTCs can sell it, and they want to take hemp out of the head shops and give it just to the licensed MSOs, came up. And, basically it was brought up by another senator in the meeting that, oh, it wasn't the senator, actually. I'm sorry, I apologize. It was the head of the National Cannabis Festival. She said that, you can get these products online from Snoop Dogg or Cheech and Chong, you know, and it gets shipped in. And so it's like, okay, you're going to shut down these businesses. You're going to hurt these small business owners, because last I checked, there weren't large conglomerates running head shops across the state. You know, Carlos is not affiliated with 7-Eleven, and then somehow you still can't regulate Cheech and Chong or Snoop from selling their products over the internet. So yeah, it's definitely a conundrum. And Maryland is the triple blue state. These are Democrats having the same conversations Florida Republicans are having, which tells me that lawmakers don't know their head from their ass when it comes to hemp and cannabis, no matter what state we're in.
Well, I think the proof in the pudding is that with the whole THC and hemp space is that they just got to get off their ass, remove it from Schedule 3, unschedule it, have it all be a non-controlled substance, and really put it under ATF or something, because the hypocrisy and the ignorance of these legislators, and you're right, it's cross-party lines now. Both of them are like, no intoxicating anything for people, even though it's legal, federally legal and not a controlled substance anymore. It's a huge problem. And I would love to see, even in Florida, any platform that I move forward with, if I run for office for 26, will include a conversion and ability for these hemp companies, like they did in New York, to switch over to add additional compliance to be able to be medical marijuana or adult use sales places.
Well, let's talk about that for a second.
Considering
Mike,
filing for that now, Mike.
What?
Well, Gary, before we get into Mike's future candidacy, let's pause on that for a minute and just put a pin in it. Let's look at these issues around hemp regulation, and what is the source of really these issues that we're having. And it goes back to, Mike touched on it, the scheduling issue. It's a lack of political will. It's a lack of real understanding, and it drives me crazy, because the entire medical marijuana industry in Florida was built so that a few, and I say few, I mean literally a handful of insiders, former legislators, and major Republican Party donors could essentially corner the market. I mean, people don't realize, but that is the origin of the largest MSO in this state, was that the Bashirs wanted to corner the market. They wanted to come out and they wanted to make money for themselves, and then here we are now. You have over 10,000 small businesses, and then they came the last two sessions and they try to fleece them for money. And it just so happens the lobbyist that represents them also happens to have been a former executive in the Florida Republican Party. So when we talk about money in politics, and for those of you watching, I'm not getting on a partisan kick. I'm just pointing out who are the stakeholders and where the origins of all this started. No different than the fact that the private prison industry started with the Tennessee Republican Party. The medical marijuana industry in the state started too. Like, you can draw different lines to different industries and who wants to get their money. And the fact is that we got another hemp bill coming back. A lot of hemp owners are not satisfied with the Healthy Alternatives Coalition. And so we have that issue. The second issue is there are hemp owners who have tried to tank adult use in ending arrests by saying, oh, this is federally legal cannabis and this and that. And the fact is that go fuck yourself. For those of you saying that. I mean that with the hardest go fuck yourself possible, is that you would sit there and tank the ability to stop arresting tens of thousands of people just so you can make a few more bucks for a couple more years. And I really mean that. Go fuck yourself if you're out there spitting that bullshit talking point.
Now, there are bills.
I'm so happy that I never took that no on the 3 stance.
Yeah, and
it's all coming back around now, and the fact that we have more hemp bills now more than ever. I mean, come on.
It's not like DeSantis didn't give guidelines as to what he wanted to say. And Mr. Cano, it's not like there's FBI tapes proving what you said. It's not like it's recorded.
Absolutely.
It's not like the current Attorney General of the United States wasn't a private prison lobbyist before she took office. It's not like she has the Epstein files but won't release them because her boss is in most of them.
Well, be that as it may,
It's
because we are running out of time here. I did want to mention there's a number of bills that actually are inching towards an adult use market. But if you look carefully at them, you'll notice that at least one or two of them happen to have these little codicils. Like, for instance, you have to be an MMTC, and you have to, and all licenses have to be vertical. Now, that's kind of a hint that it smells like True Move. Just kind of like a little bit, it smells a little bit too much like Amendment 3. There are other bills, like the one that Carlos Guillermo Smith filed, who's going to be on the show next week, which allows for the verticals to be broken up, which allows for individual licenses for cultivation, for processing, for distribution, for retail, etc. These are the things we've been fighting for many years. And if we go ahead and go with a bill that continues the status quo, we're going to get what we get. So we need to take careful looking to see which ones move forward. Now, unfortunately, the Marijuana Policy Project, and I've already gotten down about them before this on the show, is pushing towards the bills that allow for the verticals to stand. Now, I don't know whether they got Colorado on their mind or they got a little extra money from True Leave to go ahead and say that. Not that the MPP has ever been bribed before.
Yeah.
No, Gary, I just want to point out MPP is in a similar situation that Normal's in the sense that we're victims of our own success. We have half the country now legal, and there isn't a big prerogative for over 100 million to 200 million Americans to really give anymore. And then, some nonprofits, Normal's not one of them, but some will reach out to MSOs and try to secure donations. Others have to rely on the philanthropy. We, on the other hand, are different than most cannabis advocacy organizations in that our chapters, our grassroots networks, Normal of Florida, Suncoast Normal, Tallahassee Normal, are on the ground in the states doing the work, carrying the load, and the grassroots is what's keeping the national organizations alive. MPP doesn't have that same value, so sometimes you will see them influenced by their donors, where Normal doesn't necessarily have that same mechanism.
Well, we are pretty much out of time now. We're glad that Mike had a chance to get on once he found out that daylight savings time actually occurred. But Mike,
did we miss any bills though?
You've got a lot going on right now, with a lot of cases going on right now. Where can people reach you if they have to in regards to any legal problems they have?
Minardilaw.com is the best. MINARDILAW.com. Best way to reach out, and or events. We're going to be doing a lot of events this year to get out awareness and to hope continue to educate and push this movement forward. It's time. We see the other issue we didn't discuss is the ballot initiative issues that they're trying, legislation that they're trying to push through. It's totally possible that this last ballot initiative that we voted on may be the last one in the state of Florida if this legislation goes through. Sad. They're taking away our rights.
Now, Carlos did, as in Guillermo Smith, did file a bill that brought it back down to 50%, saying we're way past the fetal pig issue. It's time to get back to normalcy and make sure that a majority wins as opposed to a supermajority. Because how many states actually have that besides us? It doesn't. You're taking away the voice of the people, and that's what we need to do: is make certain that citizen initiatives are allowed to go forward. They don't always work in California, but they do work in Florida most of the time.
Well, Gary, I want people to understand this is not unique to Florida, in that we're seeing a push from the Republican Party across the various states to eliminate direct democracy. In Idaho right now, just yesterday, or rather Friday, members of the Idaho House of Representatives passed a resolution to provide the legislature with the exclusive authority to decide marijuana policy. House Joint Resolution 4 will amend their state constitution to prohibit any further voter initiative ballot questions legalizing marijuana.
Specifically.
Like a big go, like Carlos made a comment on Facebook the other day and caught a whole bunch of flack because he said Republicans have never been friendly to weed. Nixon made it Schedule 1. Reagan doubled down with the Just Say No campaign. And then of course, yes, you have the neoliberals under Clinton with Joe Biden leading the charge for these mandatory minimums and shit. And then you have dickhead local legislators like Darrell Roussan making it illegal to say the word bong in a headshot. So yes, there is guilty on both parties, but the Republican Party itself has never been friendly to weed, and we know why. Nixon said it himself. He said it because he wanted to destroy the anti-war movement, the civil rights movement, and they used weed as a propaganda tool, much in the same way it was used as a propaganda tool for the Marijuana Tax Act in the 30s. You know, it's just a shit show altogether, and we have politicians on both sides that pay us lip service. You know, Trump said, "Oh, he'll take a cannabis activist petition. He'll hear him out on weed." You know, he came up with the True Leave campaign. It's got nothing to do with our civil rights, and that's what I'm pissed off about. Is because for years our civil rights have been under attack. Mike, I applaud you, man. Like, you get it, you understand. You never let political affiliations get in the way of protecting people's civil rights, and that's how it needs to be. You know.
And I've started the whole, realistically, this cannabis and anything grown from the ground. And this is from my son's 6th grade civics class, that the earth is, and then what we get from the ground is an inalienable right given to us by our creator that the government cannot take away. And that's exactly how it should be. No one should be able to tell me whether or not I can grow and use a plant for my own use on my own property if I'm not affecting anybody else. And that's fundamentally what it comes down to: control of our minds, control of our souls, and control of everything that we do. And we're in America, and allegedly the free state of Florida, which is totally hypocrisy. That's why one of my favorite songs for politics is "America is Home of the Hypocrite" by the Violent Femmes.
Well, you know, when we talk about this voter initiatives and limiting us, the whole reason we have the 60% threshold, you can go back to the campaign records of who backed that, and it was major corporations in Florida, Publix, it was the beer companies. You know, it's these major corporations. And Mike, you, when you were running to regulate Florida, even led a campaign and boycott against Publix and a picket. And I mean, we really have to go back and pay attention to who are the people trying to attack our civil rights. It's these major corporations that want to attack our civil rights because, like you said, it all connects to keeping us sick and keeping us dependent on their products and not giving us the opportunity to do what we need to do. Gary, I know you got to head out, so we're gonna jump into the news here in a second. But we appreciate this great conversation and bringing Mike on the show today. And Mike, just is there anything else you want to say as far as letting people know how they can get in touch and if someone's in trouble, how they can get in contact with you?
Yeah, everyone, just keep on fighting, man. Just keep on fighting. Know your rights. Don't ever admit. Most important thing, no matter what you have on you, if it's not in the packaging from an MMTC, I thought it was hemp. It was hemp. I had no knowledge that it wasn't hemp, and let them prove otherwise. We got to fight this, and we got to end this war now by people being smart, people being informed, and giving us defenses to shove it up their ass.
Well,
there you go, mens rea all the way.
Yeah, Carlos, let's jump into the normal news and close out the show today. So at the top of the news hour, while we're talking on the subject of hemp and the novel cannabinoids, recent analysis that has been published from data in the American Journal of Preventative Medicine show that young adults are more likely to consume the unregulated Delta-8 THC products in jurisdictions where cannabis is illegal. Shocker. You may have seen the show that we had a couple years back with Dr. Block on, and he made the point in prohibition states is why we're seeing this. If we were just legalized, we wouldn't have this. Now, researchers affiliated with the University of Michigan and University of Southern California assessed over the past year the use of hemp-derived Delta-8 THC products among those 19 to 30. And consistent with prior studies, they reported that Delta-8 THC consumption is far more popular in jurisdictions without regulated adult-use cannabis markets. Quote, the prevalence of Delta-8 THC was significantly lower in the West than the South and the Midwest, and lower in states versus states without Delta-8 THC regulations, in states with and versus without legal recreational cannabis use, the study's authors concluded. Now, according to Normal, this is coming from our Deputy National Director, Paul Armentano, predictably, there exists far less demand for these unregulated products in an environment where whole plant cannabis is legally regulated and available. And once again, the lesson's clear. Legalizing and regulating marijuana markets is preferable to prohibiting them. Placing marijuana products behind the counter keeps cannabis out of the hands of young people and reduces the public appetite for these unregulated novel intoxicants. Now, Normal and other groups consistently continue to urge the FDA today to establish a regulatory guideline governing the production, testing, labeling, and marketing of hemp-derived cannabinoids. Let's get it clear, folks. NORML is not against the hemp industry. We want to make sure that it's regulated and it's safe. We remain in marijuana consumer advocacy organization. That being said, we will always put the consumers first, and consumers deserve safe, reliable access to cannabis. Plain and simple. All responsible consumers deserve that. It is a basic right, as Mike said, that we need to continue to protect. Now, on the news of civil rights in Montana, opponents of a THC limit bill outnumber proponents more than 2-1 during a legislative hearing meeting. Shocker there. So opponents of legislation that would impose a 15% THC potency cap on adult use marijuana products made their voice heard during their legislative hearing of the Senate Business, Labor, and Economic Affairs Committee in Montana. Opponents of Senate Bill 443 outnumbered proponents of the bill by a margin of more than 2-1, and many witnesses represented state licensed cannabis businesses who argued the passage of the measure would recriminalize most of their products. Others argued that the bill sought to unreasonably undermine the state's marijuana legalization laws, which was approved by 57% of voters. Montana got 57% yes for its adult use. So this 60% threshold, going back to Florida, is definitely a shit show. Because even in states like Montana, which is in recent years has become a battleground state, is quite shocking. Now, some of the witnesses also pushed back against language in the bill equating the availability of higher THC products with slavery. Like, that's some shit that you would think would have been said in a Florida hearing. But in 2021, lawmakers approved legislation imposing a 35% THC potency limit on botanical products, and they capped the amount of THC permissible in edible products and concentrates. Montana is one of the only states in the nation to impose limits on THC on its legally regulated cannabis market. Following the committee hearing, members moved to table the bill and suspended it from further consideration. The motion to reconsider also failed. Now, they have separate legislation, Senate Bill 255, which establishes a mandatory registry for cannabis consumers and tracks their purchases, and also was scheduled for debate last week, but was never brought before the committee. When I tell you your civil rights are under attack, I'm not being a sensationalist. They literally want to create a registry of every pothead, and they want to track what you're buying and how you're buying it, so they can better craft these THC limits, so they can better figure out how to fuck with you. That's fucked up. It's wrong in so many ways. Now, again, let's go back to how they're trying to roll things back. In Texas, a judge has denied a request from the state's Republican Attorney General to enjoin Dallas voter-approved marijuana depenalization ordinance. So on Election Day, voters in Dallas, which has a population of over 1.3 million people, and two other cities in Texas, Bastrop and Lockhart, decided in favor of municipal ballot initiatives that limit the ability of local law enforcement to make misdemeanor marijuana possession arrests, basically to support decriminalizing a less than a misdemeanor amount. Following the election, the state attorney general Ken Paxton filed litigation to prevent Dallas officials from implementing the law. The city officials in Bastrop and Lockhart declined to adopt their ordinances out of fear of litigation. So basically, they punked to the will of the voters from these punk ass politicians in local power. So, city of Tampa, your city elections are coming up. Make sure you don't elect some punk ass politicians for mayor and city council. But that being said, in recent months, Paxton has filed lawsuits against multiple cities that have moved to end low level marijuana arrests. And to date, none of his lawsuits have been successful. So, shout out to those attorneys on the front lines fighting against this overreach from state government and fighting back for the voters. Now, in Nebraska, they got the same shit show happening across the state. Nebraska's attorney general and former governor are urging state lawmakers to halt efforts to adopt a pair of citizen-initiated measures that regulate possession, use, and production of medical marijuana. 70% of Nebraska voters approved medical marijuana measures on Election Day. And Attorney General Mike Higlers and the former governor, who's now their U.S. Senator, Pete Ricketts, have called on lawmakers to ignore the voters' will. The legislature has no duty to act, they wrote, and in fact, there are plenty of reasons not to act at all. The duo opined that cannabis is harmful, easily abused, and not safe to consume, even under medical supervision. I just want to say to Senator Ricketts, go fuck yourself. And that's pretty much all I really got to say about that. Now, in Florida, we got a lot of bills happening, a lot of things moving. Carlos, if you want to drop them links and those action alerts, the first one is employment protections for patients. House Bill 83, Senate Bill 142. These will prevent public employers from taking adverse personnel actions against employees or job applicants. Shout out to Mike Minardi for getting this case going with first responders in Hillsborough County and setting the legal precedent. Clearly, legislators, if you're listening, don't be offended by what I say, but take for the simple fact that there is already a legal precedent for this. It is now up to you to act and make sure that House Bill 83, Senate Bill 142 get hearings. And you, the grassroots folks listening and watching at home, can click on the link here for the action alert from Normal. It will automatically generate an email, and all you got to do is send it to your lawmakers, including Governor DeSantis, because we can do all this great work. Gary can corner these folks. Carlos, me, Mike, we can all get up there and rah, and have protests and testify at committees. And DeSantis can still flush everything down the toilet with a veto of his pen. So when we send these action alerts, they also go to the governor to let him know we are watching and this is what the people want. Now, there is an amazing bill coming from a friend of Normal, Senator Carlos Guillermo Smith, Senate Bill 1390, House Bill 1501. This is an adult use bill that would establish a framework to oversee cultivation, processing, and retail distribution of marijuana to people 21 and up. You got to understand that according to the University of North Florida, 67% of voters in Florida support recreational marijuana use. But the people who are filling out the polls versus actually getting to the ballot box and not being fooled by these bullshit talking points from either people in the hemp industry that want to hustle and make a few more bucks, or from the opposition who have run these focus groups with their own tax dollars. That's what we're getting in the margins of why we're not getting over that 60% threshold. On top of the fact that the existing vertical medical marijuana market doesn't give entrepreneurs, capitalists, good red-blooded Americans the idea that we should move forward with adult use. And it's time to top seeding control and revenue of the marijuana market, okay, to these MSOs. And this bill here will actually help break up the verticals. We'll allow for small business owners to get into the industry. Will give us the opportunity to have a more plethora and variety of products in the medical marijuana field in Florida. And so I think that's important. On top of it, it will regulate and allow for adult use in Florida. And that's really where we want to go next moving forward. Now, Povey said, well, if it doesn't have home grow, I'm not voting for it. Look, I don't want to get in and have to rehash the single issue voter initiatives. So that being said, we have legislation. Senate Bill 546 is a pathway for patients to home cultivate. Now, it is a limited number of plants, but it's a start. You can always amend it. When they look at the fiscal notes, they'll be able to really adjust it and amend it in committee. But this will permit essentially you to grow 2 plants. Now, it only allows for 2 plants no matter how many patients are in the home, and they want to be able to come in and inspect your home. We talked in previous episodes about this. Look, they can't even have enough money to inspect every hemp business in Florida. There's no fucking way they're going to be able to afford to inspect 1 million homes, okay? So I don't foresee the way the bill is written happening, but we need to make sure that they know there's an appetite for this. And so send the action alerts. Tell your lawmakers we want home grow. We want Senate Bill 546 to move forward, but we wanted to move forward with amendments. And so please feel free to add your own comments on that at the end of it. Now, we also, in Florida, talk about civil rights. Medical marijuana patients are discriminated against in the workforce. That's why we're pushing for employment protection. They're discriminated against in medical procedures. I mean, you can still get kicked off a pain management plan. You can get kicked off the organ transplant list. And you can even have your kids taken from you or be investigated. And so we have Senate Bill 146, which will prohibit the courts from denying or restricting parental rights based solely on your status as a qualified medical marijuana patient. Fill out the action alert, send the letters to your lawmakers, and let's let them know that they need to protect the civil rights of medical marijuana patients in Florida, in particular their parental rights. And then we want to continue to expand patient access to medical cannabis in Florida. There are people out there who are suffering from very debilitating conditions. Some people are addicted to opioids, and the fact is that our current system of medical marijuana recommendations is not comprehensive. And so Senate Bill 552 will expand patient access to medical cannabis, and it also allow out-of-state patients. The tourist reciprocity bill that Gary's been working on for so many years to give the opportunity to have that, and it will finally make sure that our military veterans do not have to pay the fee to get their state medical marijuana card. So click the we've already sent sent 602 letters to lawmakers in Florida, but click it, the action alert, send your letter to your lawmakers and make sure they're doing right by veterans, by out-of-state patients, by people who are suffering from debilitating conditions. Lastly, as far as bills go in Florida, we have Senate Bill 1026 and Senate Bill 1028. These bills will help expunge low-level marijuana convictions in Florida, and convictions that involve up to 2 ounces of cannabis. So there are some folks who have some felony convictions because they might have had 21 grams. Right. And, this is actually a lot better in that it's up to 2 ounces. And then there's separate legislation that will ensure that once expunged, these records are destroyed. They're not going to come back to bite you in the ass. And I think that's the most important thing, is that if we want to move past where we've been in this country as far as criminalizing cannabis use and associating it with and giving people criminal records, it's not right. It has not worked for the past 80 years, and we need to move forward in this country on a brighter future and a new day. That being said, team, hey, look, we need you to continue to be involved in this fight. So I'm asking you to hit that like and subscribe button. I'm asking you to share this out. I'm asking you to jump into rotation with us each and every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. But more than that, we have some amazing events coming up that you can support us and support our mission. These are fundraisers, but they're also a good time. And the biggest one is the best blunt in the Bay rolling competition. April 12th, Saturday, April 12th, at the Dignitary Cafe, located at 4817 Southwest Shore Boulevard. We got our champ Landra, who's going to be competing. She just let me know that she is defending the title. We got our judge Katrina Pink there, who's one of the judges. And you can enter in not just yourself, but get together 3 other friends and put in a team of 4. Be a part of the team competition. Anybody who enters in the team automatically signed up for the individual competition. And whoever has the highest score after the end of 3 events will go to the championship round and be able to compete for the title. And I'm very excited this year because we will have championship belts, and you can walk around town with your championship belt. That's the champ. She wants you to see if you can come for her belt. She plans on defending it and walking out again. So I'm pretty excited to see who can roll the best blunt in the Bay. Go to suncoastnormal.org. Again, all the proceeds that we collect go to ending cannabis arrest in Florida for weed. Plain and simple. We need your support. And if you are having troubles, as always, go to the man, the myth, the legend, Michael C. Minardi. Go to Minardi Law. He'll help you get out of a bind. And always remember, if you get pulled over, shut the fuck up.
Just a quick point. For some reason, StreamYard is being difficult with posting these action alerts to Facebook. So I got most of them posted to most of the pages that we go live on, but you can find all of them on our YouTube. You can find all of them on our Twitch. You can find all of them on our Twitter. So if you're having problems finding a specific one, reach out to us or go to one of those platforms. What do you call it? Fucking Mike, can you roll a blunt?
Not so good at rolling blunts. I'm a paper guy, man.
You're a paper guy.
Mike was studying law books, now rolling blunts.
No, I was rolling joints. I can roll joints like with the best of them, but not blunts. Blunts just not my thing. I get really high and dizzy when I smoke the tobacco product stuff. It definitely messes me up.
I was about to say, I know you're originally from South Florida. Like, you got to be able to roll blunt.
Originally from New Hampshire, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm a paper guy.
But no worries. What do you call it? I'm dying to ask you because I heard about these initiative, like Cano brought it up. All these people that are like, if it doesn't have home grow, I'm not voting for it, right? And you just so happen to be a guy that ran a petition initiative that had home grow in it.
Yep.
So what do you think when you hear people say that?
So, again, my issue is the complexity of the ballot initiative process in Florida, and people really have to understand the aspect of it. We can only have a single subject. Our Florida Supreme Court is extremely against this issue, and they will do anything that they can to keep a ballot off an initiative off the ballot for people to vote on. And that's a low-hanging fruit for them to be able to say that you shouldn't be able to have home cultivation and legalization in the same amendment. Now, whether or not that's legally correct, I don't really know, but you have to spend X million dollars to get that determined by the Florida Supreme Court. I think personally, our amendment, the one that we made to Supreme Court that they threw out because they said it wasn't limited, was a court, kind of like the home grow thing with Joe Redner's case. It was they didn't like it and they wanted to craft an answer that could prevent it, and that's why they did, because they found ours wasn't limited, even though we had limits on use, we had limits on DUI and limits on this, but they said because you can use it in any way you want, it's not limited, right? You can smoke it, you can eat it, you can, so it's a really difficult hurdle, and I definitely understand the reason why. And people have to realize that everything that we've done in this state has been baby step increase, or decrease if the legislature gets a hold of it. So the ballot initiative is a baby step in the right direction. And regardless, the one thing I will say about the impact in the majority of counties throughout the state, since we passed medical, it's also reduced the punishment for people. The state attorneys look at it differently for people who are not medical and still getting arrested. And I think that same thing will happen if we pass this amendment for legalization. Then it's like, why are we wasting a time arresting someone for under 20 grams or whatever, because it's not in their packaging or whatever. So it's that step forward that helps people like me, attorneys who care about fighting this, push the envelope forward even further with the state attorney's office and with law enforcement, and see, really, do they want to waste these valuable resources going after innocent adults who are doing nothing wrong?
Well said, Mike. Well said. Let's normalize it. Let's legalize it.
And I will tell everyone, I think if we are able to have something on the ballot in 2026, I definitely fear that it will be the last time. Everyone realize that, because the legislature will continue to make this more difficult to do. And so I think I'm really worried that even if they pass this bill here, that we won't have an initiative for 2026 if they make it that difficult. So we really have to understand this impact of this, that you're not just voting no on cannabis legalization because you want to see the hemp industry, succeed. You're at this point, if we do get to vote on it again, it will be, I think, likely the last time any initiative will be on the ballot. And I think it's disgusting that our legislature turns around and says, oh, well, we have to keep big businesses away from supporting these initiatives. It's them coming in and doing this and changing our state. It's not Floridians. But they have taken away the ability for grassroots organizations to put a ballot initiative or an initiative on the ballot. And it's really disgusting because it is as much anti-democracy as you can get.
Yeah. Kano, you got anything else, man? I think that's a good point to end on.
No, I think they'll kick me out of the Democratic Party, but I'll cross over party lines and vote for Minardi. At this point, with that stance, I'm cool with that. Shit, we need more Republicans like him in the legislature.
Yeah, I wish you ran against Susan Valdez, bro.
Yeah, she's a Republican now, so
yeah,
he'd have to primary her. But then me and Mike might end up clashing in the general, which would be great for the voters. Either way, they still win.
Right. I mean, honestly, that whole situation of those two flipping like a week after the election blows my mind. I honestly, wow.
But it's more egregious with Valdez because she ran for chair of the Democratic Party and then flipped when she got her ass handed to her.
Yeah.
And that's the funny part. At least the other person, didn't say I want to leave the party, and then like my feelings are hurt. Fuck y'all, I'm going home.
Yeah, well, that's how politics really is, right? It's a bunch of bullshit.
Well, it's ironic, man. The money in politics is what this whole thing is about, right? You just brought up the bullshit talking points we're seeing around attacking direct democracy and saying we got to keep big business out of it. But it's big business that doesn't want direct democracy. Big business wants to keep the rigged system where their campaign donations are the things that influence, not grassroots support, not grassroots initiatives. And the sad part is that without direct democracy, we wouldn't have seen the legalization of cannabis as far as it's even gotten. And the reason we haven't finished is because in these other states, they either don't have direct democracy or again, it's still the lack of political will. I mean, I feel bad for the Carolinas. There is no direct democracy element in North Carolina or South Carolina. Other than Idaho, I think in the last three states will be the Carolinas and Idaho to legalize if we get there. without
Right.
national legalization. So,
Well, guys, I think that's a successful episode of the rotation.
catch us next week, y'all. We got some great guests coming up. Oh, not to mention April 1st, and the ballots are already going out for vote by mail, and early voting is getting ready to crank up. You got 2 congressional seats on the line in Florida with special elections. If that happened, you could actually tip the balance of power at the federal level. So for those of you who are pissed off at the way things are going right now in the federal level, turn out and vote in those special elections in Florida. And of course, catch us in the rotation each and every Sunday. Peace.
Bye.